I see I can also admit I can.
Okay, so just to inform you, we are live now. Thank you.
Okay, Eric. Thank you. So let's get started. Right. So good afternoon. Welcome everybody to this session, to our session. Thank you for your attendance. This session is called Partnerships to Advance Policy Knowledge of People on the Move, and is organized by the InterAgency Institute. The InterAgency Institute is a digital think tank dedicated to building frameworks, policies, and tools to strengthen institutional engagements within the European Union and beyond. It is dedicated to offering possible solutions, promoting cooperation, and building trust between institutions, especially in the humanitarian and security arenas. This session divides as follows. First, we are hearing our researchers' statements covering different angles of the migration issue. After the presentations, we'll propose some questions that will work as an open consultation where we would like to hear your experiences. Our main goal here with this event is to collect inputs as diverse as possible. We believe this is the only way to get to better recommendations and stronger policies. On our webpage, you'll find a link to a very short questionnaire. Next slide, please. This is our webpage. You can log in right now if you wish, but we strongly recommend that you hear our presentations, our researchers' statements first. Our first speaker is Sabrina Medeiros, with the theme Interagency Frameworks for the Benefit of People on the Move. Dr. Medeiros is a professor at Universidade Lusófona de Lisbon, Portugal. She is also licensed from the Brazilian Naval War College. She holds a PhD in political science. Secondly, I am going to explore the mediation organizations as stakeholders of the policy building process. My name is Beatriz Duarte, and I'm a PhD candidate in contemporary studies at the Coimbra University, Portugal. I hold a BA in journalism, and I have been a communications practitioner for over 2 decades. Then, Luzia Becker will talk about the specificities of the European Union's integration policies. Dr. Becker currently follows a postdoc at the Freie University in Berlin. She holds a PhD in political science. Finally, Lygia Hryniewicz will go deep down on the challenge of migrants' workforce in the EU. Dr. Hryniewicz is a postdoctoral fellow at Wuppertal University. She holds a PhD in sociology and was a faculty at the Brazilian School of Public and Business Administration, Getúlio Vargas Foundation. So without further ado, let's move on. Sabrina Medeiros, the floor is yours.
So thank you very much, Ana Beatriz, for the introduction. I'm very glad to be here again. So I'd like to thank the audience for being here, engaging in our discussions. As Ana said, we are going to divide these presentations into 4 presentations, but 2 opportunities for you to engage with us. So not only are we going to promote this discussion with the public, but also we're going to do it as a kind of merging report, so as you can access further this result. So again, thank you for staying with us till the end of the session. So I am going to talk about the interagency frameworks for the benefit of people on the move, because interagency schemes are indispensable, and efficiency is the new boundary when we consider complex operations involving immigrants. Significant improvements are associated with interoperability practices, but the operational level is not only the one that misses cooperative efforts. Migration has been a theme with a massive impact on human rights, marked by the interagency security policies which effect may overlap other demanded schemes. Plataforma R4V, which is called in Portuguese, Plataforma Regional de Coordenação Interagencial de Resposta a Refugiados e Imigrantes da Venezuela, is an interagency framework that gathers around 50 international agencies and non-governmental organizations. The impressive numbers of the Acolhida operation, which is called the operation, humanitarian operations, that organizes the receiving of migrants from Venezuela to the Brazilian border, shows a better observed through the portal, in which it is possible to access documents, reports, maps, and communication statements, making results visible through the Plataforma R4V. However, participative diagnostics are one of the most expressive outputs Acnur achieved in the region from 2020 to 2021, marking an initiative with more than 600 participants and 118 groups of discussion. Finally, the interiorization policy marks the relevant numbers civil-military interagency efforts showed by an interactive permanent portal. So those are very good results from the portal Plataforma R4V from the Venezuela migrants process. The Danish, at the other side, the Danish Refugee Council created through the Mixed Migration Center the 4MI methodology for a globalized system of collecting primary data on mixed migration flows. Based on migrants' interviews, outputs and analysis from the 4MI guarantees the view of the big picture, which is called which they call a snapshot, but remains not receiving as a tool, not serving as a tool for the migrants, information and visibility. At the other side, third, the International Organization for Migration, the IOM level, at the IOM level, the Global Migration Group was an interagency initiative to foster policy compliance and diffusion into agents and stakeholders, substituted by the United Nations Network on Migration, which is following up a reviewing of the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration, anchored by the UN Development Assistance Frameworks, which is UNDAFs, to ensure strong national ownership. It is still not accessible to migrants' communities. So, to frame how practices can uphold experience in policy building, we give a unique lens to bottom-up analysis as a way to spread initiatives and mark policy diffusion. Different dimensions may conflict with each other, and my proposal is that a significant part of the interoperability aspects is massively undertaken, especially those that cross the levels of interagency process. I propose a matrix to look for the various levels, which I call X, and dimensions, which I call Y, to analyze the migration policy management system, as you can see in the slide. Then the X levels and Y dimensions. As levels, I consider the different drivers of migration policies and institutional frameworks, which is field level, an operation management level, and a specific policy framework level, and a regime or international level, push-up level. On the other side, as to dimensions, I state that interagency schemes are of different nature, and it conditions their outreaching. That is, the way the definition of limits in between them is complex, because I suppose that those three different dimensions are the ones that impact it. So, security dimension, social dimension, and political dimension, which is the legal status. So, in other words, transparency may be a way to guarantee informing communities of migrants and mark policy comprehensiveness throughout various nodes and agents of the network, because the network is made by nodes and agents. So efforts should be concentrated in, and I state, mapping those nodes and networks. Who are the migrants? Which are the agents? Which are the agencies? orienting governance as a service from whom to who, observing gaps and building a permanent channel for denunciation. And 4, promoting channels to inform and be informed by economic opportunities for migrant inclusiveness, using local networks enabled by autarkies, by municipalities. Getting those different initiatives and recommendations under progress, I acknowledge it progresses on the recognition that policy development cannot surpass interagency barriers without knowledge or without technology. So I invite Ana Beatriz right now to complete this model talking about the mediation process with the NGOs. Thank you again.
Thank you, Sabrina, and thanks again to all attendants here today. One of the central features of the latest European Union Action Plan on Migrants' Integration and Inclusion for the next 6 years is to enhance migrants' participation. This means a bottom-up approach is institutionally desired. It intends that this participation be not only more intense among migrants, but also wider, including those EU citizens with migrant backgrounds. That makes sense. As we all know, migration was and is a central issue, a central feature for the meaning of the European Union. And so is, of course, the policy making related to it. Furthermore, it is a big step towards the understanding of migrants' policies as policies that will ultimately affect everyone. That is, that policies for migrants are policies for all. In fact, many governments aim, at least in theory, at citizen participation. But not seldom, they blame the population for poor results when it comes to engaging with participatory tools and channels they create, sometimes in one-sided decisions. What can then be done to improve participation? As you see on screen, the political agenda is shaped by decision makers in connection with public opinion, which in turn can and is influenced by third parties. Policy making is not restricted to public administration. In reality, it involves a much more complex network of stakeholders. Between policymakers and the subjects the policies they make, the subjects of the policies they make, there are many actors, much less visible. Civil society is among them. Some sectors under the umbrella of civil society are, for example, companies, the media, academics, and other research institutes like think tanks. It is indeed a key stakeholder for the success of migrant integration policies, something that the COVID pandemic has made even clearer. As Mr. Michael O'Flaherty, director of the EU Agency for Fundamental Rights, has stated, partnerships between policymakers and practitioners are something the human rights agenda cannot do without. Institutions other than government may play a role in different stages of the policymaking process. They may raise awareness and call attention of the public to a certain issue, agenda setting, advocate and influence for change, provide information and evidence, promote dialogue, and even draft policy in some cases. Not less important, civil society groups have shown to be central in the implementation as well as in the monitoring stages. So because we understand that broader participation, let's please move on to the next slide, cannot be achieved without better communication, we support the UECD's recommendation without better the UECD recommendation on how best to communicate on migration and integration, prepared with a special focus on the after-pandemic context. I quote, pre-established partnerships with NGOs, journalists, and local authorities improve governments' capacities to adapt their communication approach strategy towards immigrants. The same OECD paper goes further on specific tools to engage with migrants. For example, the use of multiple languages formats, including non-digital, accessibility, tackling misinformation, a very important issue nowadays, and avoiding a very common mistake, considering migrants as homogeneous as an homogeneous group instead of considering the diversity of several specific audience with something in common, the search for a better life through mobility. These are undoubtedly true for public and collective communication activities. But our messaging today concentrates on an underlying precondition to all these other needs: active listening. Communication is not a one-way street. No form of communication will be effective without understanding the audience. Too basic as it may seem, this old known axiom is too often forgotten. Indeed, governments are too far away from policy subjects to be able to really get to know them. So that's where mediation actors like scholars and NGO play, though not central, still a crucial role. The Portuguese scholar Boaventura Sousa Santos advocates after Brazilian educator Paula Rodriguez that researchers should research and write not about the subjects they investigate, but rather with them. This is a huge switch in thinking that breaks a hierarchy amongst parts and recognizes the populations as authors of equally valued knowledge. May this mindset then be also adopted by policymakers and all those stakeholders dealing with human rights policies. So, after these two first statements as a warm-up, Sabrina's and mine, we now move on to the first question. We can, we would love to hear your feedback on these two statements, this first part of our session today, that intends to work as a consultation to feed recommendations toward better policies. With that in mind, we would like to hear. Next slide, please. Anna, next slide, please. The question. Well, I'll read that. How interagency schemes can evolve, and what can civil society actors do to improve active listening of migrant populations? So that's a key issue for us, and we'd love to hear your feedback. We look forward to reading your inputs. So you can now log in the questionnaire on our webpage. Again, it's InterAgency Institute, interagency.institute. It is right there on our front page. Or we also invite you to hear the second part of the session with Dr. Becker and Dr. Hryniewicz. While you think of the answers, then let's hear the next presentation about integration policies. Louisa Becker, Dr. Louisa Becker, please, the floor is yours. You're muted. Luzia, you're muted. I'm sorry. We can't hear you.
Now.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
clearly.
you. Hello, everybody. My name is Luzia, and after the interesting talks by my colleagues Sabrina and Anna, I will talk about the challenges of the European Union's integration policy. As a supranational entity, the EU has no specific legal competence for integration policies, and it is up to the member states to define them. However, in order to establish a common strategic framework that might help member states further develop and strengthen their national integration policies. Several measures have been taken in the last 2 decades, as this timeline shows. I don't know if this paper I can follow and okay.
We're not sharing screen. We cannot. Can we see the presentation?
I can't see the slides.
Can you put the slides? If not, I can do it. Let me see if Ana Paula just.
I will, just a moment.
I cannot a presentation. No.
Can you cancel it and then do it again? Cancel this.
Yeah, excuse me.
You can cancel it and then do it again.
Okay.
Something got wrong.
Okay, can I follow? Or are waiting?
And now?
Yes. You should put
just
the
put it on
presentation mode. Good.
Thank you.
Perfect.
So make sure the slide is okay.
This is
so
time.
Integration is
Okay.
the new. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
Go on.
Okay. That is the timeline shows. I draw attention to the action plans published starting 2016, when, according to European Commission data, there were 20 million 30 countries national residing in the EU, which represented 4% of its total population. Published in June 2016, the first European Action Plan on the integration of 30 country nationals covered several policies areas at EU and member state level from the following policy priorities: pre-departure or pre-arrival measures by providing information and language skills, education, integration into the labor market, and access to vocational training, access to basic services, housing, health, and active participation and social inclusion. The 2060 plan comprehended actions for each of these 5 policy priorities and 4 instruments for coordinating, financing, and monitoring it. It also listed measures and the main actors of these measures. The local plans and the action taken have made a positive contribution on improving the integration of 30 country nationals in all EU member states. However, according to the Commission, some shortcomings and areas for improvement have emerged during their implementation. These include the lack of data and a structured monitoring system, and the difficulty of access to specific segments of the population. Following this, the second action plan on integration and inclusion from 2021 to 2027 addresses cross-cutting issues such as promotion partnership between key integration stakeholders, fight racism and discrimination, optimizing the use and impact of EU funding on integration and inclusion, using digital tools and monitoring progress in delivering integration and inclusion policies based on reliable data. The plan also considers the specific needs of different groups, among them EU citizens with a migration background, women, religious minorities, and people with disabilities. In this process, the involvement of the host society is of great importance. Also, in this process, local and regional authorities play a key role in designing and implementing efficient, sustainable, and replicable integration programs. Thank you for your attention. And now to our next speaker, Lygia. She will talk about important topics on how to build effective integrations program.
First, thank you for your presence. Thank you, my colleagues. Thank you, Dr. Luzia Becker, for the introduction. What can we say about qualification and adjustment for the youth migrant population in European Union? I would like to start saying that in Europe, the working age population between 15 and 64 years old is projected to decline by 7.5 million between 2013 and 2020, while it will grow in the same proportion in the OECD area as a whole. Under a scenario with zero net migration, the working age population of the 28 European Union countries would be expected to decline by even more, 11.7 million by 2020. Under this scenario, Germany, Italy, for example, and Poland would each lose more than 1.5 million people of working age by 2020. As the structure of the economy changes, a considerable amount of net occupational change occurs through the entry of young workers and the exit of older workers. It is often argued that this decline should be offset to avoid lower economic growth and well-being. This requires additional workers, including immigrants, to move in the occupations from which older workers are retiring. The picture, however, is not so simple. First, in many countries, there is still considerable slack in the labor market, not only with respect to open unemployment, but also regarding low labor market participation of women, older workers, and other groups such as resident immigrants and their children. Secondly, workers are extending their working lives, which contributes to increasing the size of the labor force. Significant numbers of immigrant entries are observed in both growing and declining occupations. However, immigrants make up for only a fraction of total movement into these occupations. In Europe, over the past decade, new immigrants represented 15% of entries into strongly growing occupations such as science, technology, and engineering, as well as the health and education professions. Large numbers of workers retiring from an occupation do not necessarily imply that many immigrants will have to be recruited to make up for the apparent shortfall in youth entries, nor does a significant inflow of youth into strongly growing occupations obviate the need for recruitment from abroad. Recruitment needs depend on the precise nature of labor market, and this is difficult to predict over the medium term. Free movement is one of the 4 fundamental freedoms in the European Union, but it's also an underused economic resource. From an economic standpoint, as pointed out in the seminal work of Mundell, written in 1961, labor mobility has a key role to play as a shock absorber within a currency union. Given the disparate labor market conditions, prevalent across the European Union, mobility within the European Union could indeed act as a significant re-equilibrating force, thereby contributing to employment growth. As we see here in the chart, one thing that calls attention is that the most widely used and readily available proxy for skills is educational attainment. For example, immigrants tend to be overrepresented at both ends of the qualification scale, and in Europe have on average slightly fewer years of education than the native-born. Relative to their native-born peers, immigrants in the United States have lower education, for example, levels than immigrants in Europe. At the same time, one observes that in both regions, immigrants who have arrived more recently are more highly educated than immigrants who arrived, for example, years ago. Immigrants who have arrived recently also have almost the same number of years of education as the native-born of the same age and gender living in the same country, particularly in Europe. This holds independent of origin countries, and it is a strong indication of a changing pattern of migration flows towards more qualified migration. That concludes my presentation. I sincerely appreciate your attention today. And finally, before you leave the conference today, please take 4 minutes to, some minutes to answer the following question. So our question is how to build integration policies in line with young migrant populations in terms of interaction and adaptability tools. For example, what can be done in terms of job market? You will find the question in your website, and as Ana Beatriz clarified, and if you need some help, please let us know. Thank you.
Thank you, Lygia. So let's have some minutes for the people in the room and also for those who are watching the live presentation. Both questions, you can find both questions in our website on screen, interagency.institute.
So maybe Ana Paula can share with us just the way we could achieve it. So when we access interagency.institute, then we can see the banner of the event, which is Fundamental Rights Forum. And you just click in the banner, and then you move directly to the forms. The other way to go to the link is going to events inside, and then again pushing the Fundamental Rights Forum banner. And you can see it. So here, she's doing it.
So this is our website.
This is the website. Just click on it, and then it opens immediately the forms, which is a Google form divided into 3 parts. So the first part, you're gonna answer the first question, which is how interagency schemes can evolve and what civil society actors do to improve active listening of migrant populations. And then you're gonna go through the through the form to the next part, which is about the second question, which merges the points that were said, that were part of the talks that Lygia and Luzia did. So next, you go into the third part of the form, in which you can put other ideas for our final report and suggestions. And also you can access our email for contact. So with this, we must mark that the forms, both the results and the report, the final report, would be accessible through our site. You may also follow us in our LinkedIn platform, in the LinkedIn platform. So, did we have sufficient time for them to answer, Ana Beatriz? No, still we have some minutes.
Yeah, no, maybe no. We could wait some more moments for those to engage in the questionnaire. I just like to remind you that it's a very short questionnaire, and your inputs will be much available for us, and they will be forwarded to potential decision makers through our report that you be also able to access on the website very soon.
So also we would like to say that while you do the form, while you fill in the form, just to make sure that everyone knows that we have a special line of research dedicated to migration, which is really new. We are a group of researchers mainly dedicated to security issues, and right now we are reinforcing our efforts on the migration scene, and that's why this participation and reporting this afterwards is of utmost importance for our development as a think tank. We also must fill in the forum session harvesting sheet, in which they also ask us the Fundamental Rights Forum 2021 ask us about the key messages of our session, which conclusions were drawn, and what are the key recommendations, suggestions, calls for action, commitments, and which are the next steps that are being proposed here. So right after you can fill it in, I am going to do a wrap up considering those answers we should give them. So again, thank you. So I really think I can move on. The questionnaire, the survey will be available for you after the session. So we're going to make sure at least 48 hours this survey will be receiving answers. And let me just do this wrap up of the session so as we can consolidate some of the insights we intended to show here today. So Ana Beatriz talking about not only the NGO's participation through innovation, but how citizen advocacy and citizen active communication would be the most important for the migrants' inclusion and participation into the policy processes. They are the clients, in which they are the clients. So Ana Beatriz was talking about was talking to us about the information and awareness building. So for Ana Beatriz Duarte, this information and awareness building passes through the development of expertise and advice, so that experts with specific knowledge can participate, strongly in those processes as kind of third parties, and as to guarantee the quality of those processes, as it is said in the Code of Good Practices for Civil Participation, which also provides this cross-cutting support to participation. But also, Ana Beatriz was talking about the importance of the migrants policies being added or adding to the e-participation processes. So we cannot talk about the e-democracy without considering that a group of non-represented people are completely out of those processes of policy building. So not only they should be the clients of those policies, but also they should be part of the capacity building for their own participation. So this is very much connected, because she's also talking about the way NGOs and public authorities can structure this cooperation on behalf of those populations in the e-democracy scheme. And then I entered talking about the interagency schemes. So in my opinion, the interagency schemes must be developed considering the various levels of governance which must be connected. So from the local installments and local governance and institutions, processes, to the most macro policies, which are from the international regimes. So we have 4 levels at least: the tactical, the operational, the strategic, and the international, but also crossing those levels with other dimensions, because we should also cross those different dimensions and make sure that they connect with each other, so that we cannot afford to have security policies without understanding the policy processes and also the social dimension and the social barriers to policy development and to security development. Next, Luzia talked about the local dimension. So as I said, and also as Ana Beatriz addressed the local dimension when we consider the e-democracy or the most important levels of macro policies, it is very much important, because without the local, the local frameworks and the local scheme working well, we cannot achieve those other levels. So as Luzia stated, she draws attention on the action plans published from 2016. And according to this, the local plans, which drawn up and on those actions, they had made a very positive contribution on improving the integration of third country nationals in the European member states. So without this local dimension, it's not possible to make integration possible. So even though states agree, there is the access to basic services, housing, health, education. So the involvement of the whole society is of great importance, and it begins with the local dimension. And finally, Lygia was telling us about the labor scene. And as she stated, the labor scene had changed a lot, because free movement is one of the 4 fundamental freedoms in the European Union, but it's also an underused economic resource. Migrants can be not only the problem of those policies, but the solution, especially because there's still much to do in terms of the participation of women, older workers, and other groups such as youth, but also because these immigration processes from the last years are of very qualified workforces, and that's why we have to change our mind in terms of the different view of how those integration processes must be governed and how we can achieve better integration in terms of human rights, which is the final achievement we want. So I'd like to invite Ana Beatriz finally to end up the session for us. And again, I would like to say that we are going to, just to move forward, if we can have all those ideas together. So we would very much like your attention and your contributions so as we can move forward with those ideas and make sure policy development is on the road. So thank you again. And Anna, please.
Thank you, Sabrina. Now, I'd just like to thank you once more to all my colleagues, those wonderful insights and presentations, all our hard work on migrations at the InterAgency Institute, which is a very, very new digital think tank. And remind you all that the form will remain available on our website for a couple of days, and the report will be available soon too, as well as the video recording of the session. So thank you to the attendance. It's just a pity that we cannot have interaction with all those